Hey everybody, welcome back to Front Page Fitness. It is me, Eric Trexler, joined as always by the Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple. Lauren, how are we doing tonight?
I just can't get over that you're not wearing a hat.
Yeah, and I will say this, I was a little concerned. The live chat is way thinner than normal, but that trend was materializing before any visual element happened. So I don't want to see any blame that people popped into the live chat and immediately left because of my jarring bald head. As I explained to you, Lauren, I'm quite comfortable showing off my very bulbous shaved head. What I'm not comfortable with is when I'm extremely lazy and don't shave my head as frequently as I should. So I've been very good about shaving my head, which means hat is now optional, which is huge during the spring and summer months. So we're letting the skull breathe a little bit.
Have you had a sunburn head?
No, because I almost always wear hats. So that's the nice thing. That the hat comes off rarely.
Okay.
So luckily I've not had to deal with that. I'm sure I will at some point before I perish. But speaking of me perishing, Lauren, I
When you
have.
go to Australia, you gotta sunscreen that head.
Oh Lord, I haven't. Well, I'm going in like June or July. I'm going in June or no May. Sorry, I'm going in May, which means it's basically like winter, right?
Yeah, it won't be that cold.
Okay, but I'm the angle of the sun and however all that bullshit works. I don't think any of it's true, but you know what I'm getting at. Anyway,
Sunscreen your head.
so speaking of me perishing, huge revelation the other day, huge story. So I have talked about my age on this show before. I often talk about the wild ride that is being a 35-year-old man, and I was talking with my wife the other night and kind of contemplating because I have a birthday coming up, and for me, going from 35 to 36 for whatever reason feels like a big jump. Like this feels bigger to me than 29 to 30. And I was trying to like talk through why that is. I don't know if it's because in a lot of like training studies or like, exercise science papers, it's like young adults 18 to 35 is like the common age range. I was like, man,
So
I'm
you're
I'm
out.
moving categories here. But anyway, I was kind of, going on and on and on about how big this is as I go from 35 to 36. And my wife basically said, well, yeah, all that stuff's great, but you're not turning 36. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I, Lauren, have been under the impression for one calendar year that I'm a year older than I actually am. And so I wanted to take this time to, I've been telling
Wow.
everyone I'm 35. That is not true. I have been 34 and saying I'm 35 for a full year. And so I just wanted to use this. I think this is the right venue to do it to any government agency that may be hearing me. If you asked me to list my date of birth in the last 12 months, you got accurate information. But if you asked me to list my age, I may have committed many crimes in falsifying that number purely by accident. So this was huge for me. And Lauren, I have to tell you, for reasons I don't fully understand, I probably need to talk to a therapist about this. The relief that I felt. I was like, oh my God, I'm a young 34-year-old man. I felt like I basically, like, Lauren, when you were in like college and you thought this thing was due on the 14th, but it was actually due on the 21st. And you're like, oh my God, I have a whole week of extra productivity that I just unlocked. I feel like I just unlocked a free year of achieving my goals at no cost. And I was like so thrilled about it. So I'm looking forward to what I'm considering the free year, which is my actual second attempt at being 35 years old.
This is very interesting. And you have definitely talked about being old, very, very old, at least once an episode, I'd say,
Yeah.
since the beginning of this show. But now in hindsight, maybe it was too early to purchase those geriatric pants.
No, I would say they're not geriatric pants. They are all purpose utility pants in my book. So I don't regret that. That's one of the best decisions I've made other than my marriage in the last several years. So I feel great about that. But yeah, I mean, I think I am an old soul. Well, I'm certain that I'm an old soul. And I think my brain just said, I'm sorry, you cannot possibly be 34. And it just added a number. But the thing that hurts most about this, while much of it is upside, one time my mother did this and she went a whole year claiming to be 1 year older than she really was. And when I heard about that, I made fun of her in merciless fashion for a very long time. And to
Mm.
specifically replicate that mistake after giving her such a hard time, I thank God she doesn't listen to the show. But if that ever gets back to her, I'm in big trouble.
Yeah, you definitely should avoid sharing that.
Yeah. But
It's very
Lauren,
annoying when parents are right.
it is indeed. You brought up the geriatric pants,
I
and
did.
so we got an email, I think, about geriatric pants. But you said in the outline here, a year into the podcast is the best advice we've given our listeners simply the endorsement of Eric's geriatric pants. First of all, I'm glad you wrote that. I had no idea that we are coming up on the 1 year mark. But looking at the numbers, uh, it is episode 49, and I think we've been good about doing it every single week, right? So 52 probably will be right around the to the day, the anniversary there. So first of all, good for us coming up on a big anniversary. Second of all, is that the best advice we've given? I think so. Do you have any others you'd like to throw in the mix, or is this uncontested?
Well, I have to say I don't like it because I'm not involved. Also, it's sort of unrelated to the mission of the podcast, which frankly, to be honest, the mission is unclear because we've uh, continued to evolve into fashion, weird food, relationship advice, and the occasional fitness content. But I feel like I provide no value. And so I'm wondering if this should just be a one-man show sponsored by Geriatric Pants, perhaps with like FPF on the butt, and you can just sell those and get really, really rich. Because the 90s is coming back. I don't know if folks remember when those sweatpants with logos or Juicy Couture, the OG, it was on the butt of your sweatpants. I think that could be really interesting to explore.
So I'm already thinking one step ahead. If we're going to do anything branded, I want to, rather than, because the geriatric pants, the whole selling point is that they look like, high quality slacks that you could wear in a business environment. If we're going to spice things up, I'm thinking a line of Velcro shoes that
Oh no.
that look like they're a little more like a sneaky Velcro business shoe or a sneaky Velcro like corporate casual loafer that looks very classy, something you could wear,
No.
business casual or even a little bit higher end, and no one would know that you were wearing geriatric, very comfortable Velcro shoes.
Why
So,
do they need to be Velcro? Why can't they just be slip on like an actual loafer?
because that's the whole point, is that the Velcro is what makes them geriatric. So we will find a way to work Velcro into the situation. But those we can spice up. We can do all sorts of branding and logos
Okay.
and things like that. But no, Lauren, the way I would put it is this. In terms of delivering value on the show, I like that you said that we've evolved rather than devolved in terms of what we do on the show.
Right.
But what I would say, do you have a train barreling into your home as we speak?
Possibly.
Okay. Watch out for that. I've never heard such a vivid train sound. It was like unbelievably clear. But anyway, sorry, what was I saying? Oh yeah, in terms of delivering value on the show, aside from the ambiance of sounding like we record in a train station, uh, I would say that I have delivered the single most useful piece of information. But if we then did a top 10 list, I think you have 9 out of the 10. So it's not just about having this single kind of
Okay.
highlight banner thing. This would be like, remember when Eric hit that grand slam that like won the big game against this one team, but you're the person on the team that bats leadoff and has the highest batting average on the team, right? So I had the big memorable hit, but you're the
Okay.
person who's, putting people on base and hitting runs in on a day in and day out basis. So pardon the baseball metaphor. I don't know if they do that in Canada. But in any case, I know you have a couple teams, but it's for the American League. So in any case, I think that you bring a lot of the mid-range value, but I really came off the top rope and kind of provided the major highlight there, the crown jewel of the show, I would say. But
So we're in sync. You're Justin Timberlake, and you're gonna go solo on tour with your geriatric pants and leave me in the dust.
No, I have no plans to do that. No specific plans. I wouldn't necessarily write it off and say it'll never happen, but I have not taken that step. But we did get an email from Graham. Graham says, such a big fan that I'm going through the back catalog. I gotta know what the geriatric pants are that Eric wears. People always asking for the link. It is in the show notes somewhere. Listen to all the episodes. Look at all the show notes. It exists somewhere. The brand, last time I bought it, I don't know how to pronounce it because this is a very Chinese institution, the entity that sells these pants. If I sound it out, it looks like Le Titao or something of that nature. Apologies to the good people for butchering their company name. As Graham notes, the fake zipper really is the clincher. That's what helps you. It's such a small detail, but it makes all the difference in the world, right? You walk around in some sweatpants that don't have a fly in a zipper. People are saying, what are you doing? Go change and wear something work appropriate. You have a fake zipper, and sometimes even the little metal part may be poking out beyond the flap. You never know. Then you're signaling to the whole room, these are real dress pants. All right. These are real pants with a real metal zipper. No one needs to know that the zipper cannot go down. So yes, these pants are just a lifesaver. I highly recommend them. And Graham also sealed the deal with this email by including a picture of a very handsome cat, a very beautiful cat. Her name is Zuzu. And listen, if you want to get straight to the depths of my heart, send a picture of a cat. Lauren will get it to me. Those are actually the only emails that Lauren is authorized to forward to me are the ones that have cat pictures. But listen, I love my cats. I'm a sucker for a great cat. And spoiler alert, all cats are great cats.
He also says cat maxing. Cat maxing isn't going to happen. We're not doing it. I reject it. We don't need it. Pass.
Yeah, especially because cat maxing, if you really take that literally, there are people who have tried to genuinely maximize their cat situation. It usually doesn't go well. You don't want to out cat your coverage in terms of what you can provide as a safe functioning living environment. So I would say, folks, make sure you're thinking about what is the maximum number of cats that I can sustain in a way that is safe and healthy for them. So even though you want to have 110 cats, maybe 3 is the right number.
Okay. Are you thinking about getting a third?
I had been thinking about it big time, but then we've had some expensive vet bills, and I'm crunching the numbers, and I'm thinking maybe 2 is about the level of liability that I'm comfortable with at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've told my wife, I said, listen, I hope you're in my life for the duration of it, but one thing that's non-negotiable is I'm going to have 2 cats in my life, period. I don't want to live another day without having 2 cats. So that'll be until the day I die. Luckily, she's fully on board with that, so we didn't have to make any very difficult decisions.
Well, listen. Before I was happy for you to endorse your weird pants, even though I don't support them. Although I've said I did see them in person once and they did look fine.
None the wiser. No idea.
However, they're from Amazon and I am in an extreme battle with Amazon right now because they're selling a book allegedly authored by me that I was completely unaware of.
Nice.
And I have emailed you, Amazon, and you've said, we need to review this further. We'll get back to you. Oh, we need to continue to review this. We'll get back to you. And come on. This is a book. It's called Built But Not Broken. It has an author below the title. And then they've put my name above the graphic on this book. And somebody ordered this and gave it a 1 star because it's not authored by me. And probably someone just chat GPT'd some stuff, printed it out, and made a hard copy book. This is very weird. I don't like it. Amazon, I'm mad at you. Please remedy this.
So this reminds me, Lauren, I saw on Instagram a comedian who's very, very funny. I believe his name is Todd Glass, but he was telling a joke in this clip. And he tells the joke. It was funny, but it wasn't tremendous. And so he basically immediately said, that's not even my act. There's a guy in the audience from the Make-A-Wish Foundation. He wanted to have a professional comedian say one of his jokes. There he is. Listen, they didn't like it. So he basically pawned it off on an audience member saying that was their joke. It's not part of my bit. And therefore, I know you didn't laugh. I did my best with it, but it's not my fault that that wasn't funny. And I feel like this is a little bit what you're doing, is that unbeknownst to me or any of your colleagues, which we would have fully supported you, but you, instead of having us like review a draft or saying, hey folks, I'm excited about this, you thought you were going to slip one kind of under the radar and just, make a splash, a surprise book that no one knows about. You got that initial 1-star review, and then you slap this poor Amber M. Arrington that you slapped on at the bottom there. And you're trying to pawn it off on her and say you didn't even write the damn thing. Lauren, listen, if people didn't like the book, you don't have to, I wouldn't take it personally.
Right. Yeah, I've been secretly writing a book that I never promoted that is somehow for sale on Amazon. That is co-written by a woman I've never heard of. But yeah, it's my problem. I did it. This is totally my plot.
When you were writing this book and thinking through the the cover,
yeah,
what is this shape I'm seeing?
I think it's dumbbells with like a DNA helix.
Dumbbells?
Perhaps.
This is really quite something, and not the good way like you want. I'm really struggling to wrap my head around this.
I mean, it sort of looks like Legos with a Christmas ribbon.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to see dumbbells and I can't get there. Yeah, it looks
I
like Legos
I
with
don't
a
want
ribbon.
to. I don't want to endorse this book or encourage anyone to look it up because it's not mine, and I'm trying to get Amazon to fucking delete it from their website. Excuse me. Sorry for all the children listening.
Oh boy.
But it's very annoying. I'm unhappy.
Yeah. I would say, Lauren, next time just come up with a better cover image would be my advice. I don't know. I can't speak to the content itself, but I'll give it a read and let you know what I think. No,
Do not give it a read. It is not my book.
I would say this means you made it. You've got people pretending that you wrote a book, basically thinking if I slap Lauren's name on this, people will recognize that name and associate it with quality and rigor, and therefore they will buy my fake book with the Lego cover with a ribbon wrapped around the Lego. And if the cover image is any indication, I know we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I am, and I'm not liking what I see. So I would encourage people, whether or not Lauren wrote it, it's kind of unclear at this point. Either way, let's just skip this one. Nobody buy it. And if Lauren writes then another one that she's excited about promoting, she'll let you know, and we can buy that one. Does that sound fair?
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So next up here, now that we got that out of the way, the headline just says creatine salt, and I am very stunned at what I'm seeing from just the URL, because there are a number of creatine salts, if we use like the chemical term for salt, that are marketed and sold as, usually slightly more expensive, not necessary versions of creatine, and yet they are creatine, with another thing kind of plopped onto them. But I'm seeing creatine pink Himalayan salt, and Lauren, you got to tell me what this is and what this is all about.
This is seasoning salt that you would put on your food that has creatine in it. I have questions because the texture of salt is quite dissimilar to the texture of creatine. But this product that's available for pre-order claims that 1 teaspoon contains 3 grams of creatine, supporting a steady, routine-based approach rather than all or nothing dosing.
Okay.
I have another question. Who uses 1 teaspoon of salt on a regular basis? Like, what are you putting 1 teaspoon of salt on? That's a lot of salt.
Well, I don't want to talk about it, but I do. I have a bit of a salt problem. I make air popped popcorn, and I hit it with the butter spray, and then I get pretty generous with the salt, but I measure it in pinches. So I do that mostly to protect myself from interacting with the actual amount going into the bowl. That's more of an emotional, psychological thing. Here's what I'm interested in. I'm looking at the label here, and it says amount per serving. Says sodium, pink Himalayan salt, 540 milligrams. Then it says pink Himalayan salt, 1,500 milligrams, and then creatine monohydrate, 1,500 milligrams. This is for half of a teaspoon. So I guess I've never really thought about how much. I guess if the sodium only makes up about a third of the Himalayan salt component, and then that in its entirety makes up about half. But listen, I guess I would say this, Lauren. For you to get your daily dose of, let's call it 3 grams of creatine, now we're already looking at, 1,000 milligrams of sodium. Most people usually aim for 5, so we're closer to 2,000 than we are 1,000 at that point. There's got to be a way to get. Just hear me out, Lauren. Let me know if you have any creative ideas. Is there a way for me to get my creatine that doesn't involve also getting basically my full daily allotment of sodium by default stapled to my creatine? Is there any other avenue or route of administration I could use such that I wouldn't essentially be on a crash course for hypertension by default just by getting 5 grams of creatine in?
This is a really, really good question because we actually tend to get sodium from other sources in our diet throughout the day, other than just seasoning salt. And you know what? I actually have great news for you. You can supplement with creatine all by itself
You know what I'll
without the
do?
salt.
You know what? In order to kind of get like the health halo effect of Himalayan salt, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out with a product called Pink Himalayan Salt Extract, and it's just going to be the creatine component of this product. And so it technically will be creatine monohydrate, but I'm going to rebrand it as Pink
Oh,
Himalayan Salt Extract. And so
okay.
that way I get the best of both worlds. I'll say this is a sodium-free Himalayan salt substitute.
I
It
love
does
that.
not actually taste salty, and yet it delivers most of the nutrients that you associate with your creatine Himalayan salt product. So that is going to be my big break. And folks, listen, I want to get ahead of this. I want to get ahead of the controversy. I flippantly made a comment about hypertension and sodium. I know it's a lot more complicated than that, folks. But what I will tell you is that a decent percentage of the human population is sodium sensitive with regards to their blood pressure. And I really don't love the idea of stapling your, chemically binding your daily creatine dose to essentially a daily maximal amount of your kind of recommended limit for sodium. So, Lauren, thank you for bringing this to my attention as a creatine researcher, and also shame on you for allowing this to exist.
I actually have another comment because this brand, which is new, it only has one product available for order currently, which is that creatine pink Himalayan sea salt. But they have 2 other products coming soon, which appear to be other creatine seasonings. So they've gone all in. They sell nothing else. They're all about creatine seasoning.
Hey, there you go. Maybe there's some lower sodium options that'll make their way in. Here's the thing. I will say this. Website's pretty sleek, nothing too out of the ordinary, but pretty sleek. And they look like a good bunch of folks. They look very pleasant. They look like fine, happy people. So I don't wish to be critical of this. I just, Lauren, oh my God. And it looks like they're based out of North Carolina, if I'm looking at their logo right.
They're coming for you.
There are so many things that make me want to like these folks and support them, but I just really don't like this product idea, Lauren. I got to be honest with you. So I mean no animosity. Oh my God. They literally live like 15 miles from me. They actually are going to come for me. They know where I work, which basically means they know where I live. So again, I'm sorry, guys. I kind of hate the idea. But hey,
They should have consulted you. You're down the road.
should have
You know a
consulted
thing or
me.
two about creatine
I
and
would have
salt,
I would have
obviously.
been very generous with the advice. I would have kindly said I feel like we kind of have the creatine thing solved. I don't know if we necessarily want to do this, but in any case, hey, if this I'm open to being wrong about this, Lauren, because I will say this. I'm a guy who eats sodium. All humans do. I think creatine is a completely justifiable product. So maybe we're wrong,
No.
Lauren.
We're
Maybe
not
we're
wrong.
wrong, and maybe we're
We're
going to
not
see in the
wrong.
live chat. I'll open my eyes and take a chat here. Maybe there's a lot of people who are saying this absolutely addresses a need of mine because I've been really struggling to find ways to get sodium in my diet, and I also don't like taking my creatine in the most convenient ways possible. So we could be
I,
wrong.
I, I just have to say in their description, first of all, this is a $22 US 16-ounce bottle of creatine salt. Secondly, they say this is the first creatine product intentionally designed to live in the kitchen, not the supplement cabinet. It bridges two worlds, nutrition science and everyday cooking. Everybody calm down. It's like the supplement cabinet lives in another structure that you have to hike to find your creatine. Our supplement cabinet is so stocked that it couldn't possibly exist in the kitchen. They needed to consult somebody on this messaging. It's not compelling. It's not compelling.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It just hurts me because I like to support people, especially local small businesses. But wait a minute. Oh my God, Lauren, these cheerful people, I don't think that's the people who started the company. I think I got duped into these charming, laughing people, thinking they were part of the crew. I don't think that's them. Those are just the models, the stock models for the swag, the sweatshirts and hats and stuff. So now I've been duped, and now I'm back angry. So I take back
And why do they have merch when they do, like why do they have merch and we don't have merch?
that
They
as a
haven't
good.
sold a single bottle of creatine salt.
Well,
We've
no,
recorded 49 episodes of this podcast
the creatine salt is available for purchase. It's just the
for
other two.
pre-order.
Okay, well the other two are allegedly sold out. Could that mean they've not begun selling it? Maybe. But in any case, the other two mystery seasonings are listed as sold out. So we cannot make any claims about their revenue. We do not know. They could have sold untold units of whatever the other mystery products are. But yeah, as much as I want to support the local small businesses, this is not a particular product that suits or addresses any of my needs or pain points. So I'm going to pass. But that is, if people want to take them up on it, I'm here for it. We did see people in the live chat who said they weren't necessarily into the creatine salt, but they were interested in a barbecue dry rub or maybe even a cinnamon product. How about this, Lauren? Now, hear me out on this.
Texturally, that works better for me.
What if we did a cinnamon Splenda mixture that you would like wake up, have lightly buttered toast, and then put on your cinnamon Splenda creatine mixture and eat that for your breakfast, and we could tweak the ratio so you get your 5 grams for the day with a lovely breakfast. Kickstart your
This
day.
doesn't work because a 5 gram scoop of creatine is too much to mix with anything because you need to mix enough of the other in order to actually blend it so it just doesn't taste like creatine. And then you have way too much powder.
I'm not
That doesn't
above.
work.
Listen, what's so wrong?
I will
about,
do it. I'll go upstairs. I'll do 5 grams of creatine, 5 grams of cinnamon. I'll mix it in a bowl and I'll text it to you. And I'll show you how this couldn't possibly work
Well, no.
on one piece of toast.
Put it on a piece of toast. Your 5 gram. Put the amount.
I'd need 5 pieces of toast.
No, you need one piece of toast. Put the amount of cinnamon and sugar you would normally have, or cinnamon and Splenda, and then you put on the 5 grams of creatine. You just have creatine on toast. What's so wrong about
Sounds
that?
horrible.
All right. We'll give it a shot.
And you
let
don't
us-
want it either. Come on, you don't want it either.
I would try it one time and I wouldn't enjoy it.
It would be bad.
But okay.
It's just texturally misplaced.
We've been spending way too much time away from our stomping grounds of the New York Post, which brings us to our next headline, which is sword yoga. So it looks like the sword yoga trend is taking over New York City. So this is officially your problem, Lauren, being a New York City native. So what can you tell us about this trend that you are presumably engrossed within, and what is taking over your hometown?
So I feel like we covered one of these classes that was a group fitness class with sort of violence, and there were violent imagery in the studio, and it was dark, and they were doing kind of punching and violent movements. But this is people doing yoga holding a sword.
Yeah.
And I don't know so much about this because the claim is that it's a fusion of Tai Chi and Kung Fu and
I was gonna
some
say that.
Vinyasa yoga.
I was gonna
Okay.
say from the video, it looks a lot more like Tai Chi than yoga. So I'm glad that they acknowledge that.
Um, but like, are we saying everyone should buy a sword and do this? Can you take this?
Well,
Like they had a weapon up pop-up class, but that was in Miami, so New York City can't take credit for it. Also, the idea of a weapon up pop-up class for fitness is I don't know that I think that's an appropriate name for a fitness class or pop-up of any kind.
well, you know, it's been a couple years since the last time I was in New York City, but I do remember my wife and I were walking around town. Not necessarily the best part of town, I would say, and it was dark and late. But I did feel like more people should have weapons here. Like that was my biggest, the thing I couldn't shake as I was walking around New York late at night is where's all the weapons? It almost feels weird to not see them. And so I guess if this is what it takes to get more weapons in the hands of more people in American cities, then so what if there's a fitness element? I think that the most important thing is the former, not the latter. So stretch all you want, but most importantly, I do think this addresses a really urgent need in America.
Well, apparently you can purchase one to be shipped to your home for a one-time fee of $64.99, but it's actually for exclusively training purposes. So you can't use that blade for any other reason.
I gotta be honest, that is a very low cost. I'm concerned about the durability of these swords. I'm concerned about the
Yeah.
manufacturing quality. This is not a sword that I would carry into battle if they're selling it for $64.99 with shipping included. Is that how it was?
I don't think shipping was mentioned, so
Okay.
probably plus shipping.
Okay. That helps me out a little bit because, I would imagine swords don't ship very cheaply. But in any case, this is not the kind of sword that you really want to write home about, in my opinion. So, and I will say, I was, when I was young, a very long time ago, Lauren,
Yeah, forever ago. Decades.
at least 35 years ago, if not more,
Right.
Lord of the Rings was really big. And so every young boy whose mind was captivated by the Lord of the Rings universe they knew a thing or two about a good sword, I think, or at least they convinced themselves as such. So these are not the kind of swords that I want to get involved with.
I just can't. Why is the fitness class called Weapon Up? It's not a good name for a fitness class.
Yeah, I
You need to
mean,
rebrand that name. Weapon Up is not a good name.
yeah, weapon up sounds like a directive and not the kind you want to hear. I could see like a self-defense fitness class where you do a lot of like weapon disarming maneuvers and you say, certainly not weapon up, de-weapon, weapon down, something like that. I think that it's actually a viable, to me, like I actually really think that'd be, I'm sure, I mean, people certainly do it already, but you do
Sure.
some fitness, some calisthenics, some strengthening, and you learn some minor self-defense maneuvers. To me, that's a great way of doing fitness, especially if you live in a place where there's a lot of crime. So I think we should maybe focus more on the disarming rather than arming up the populace for our fitness endeavors. That'd be my 2 cents. Sorry to all who find that to be the wrong take and perhaps even preachy.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has the right to bear swords at the gym, so how
Yes.
dare you?
All right, Lauren, this is going to be a big one here. The Huffington Post, which still exists, I have it on good authority. You did
Does.
not go find headlines from 2014. So this one I'm sure is going to be a very explosive discussion because it says, loading the dishwasher, we're doing it wrong. As a man, debatably in his 30s, I'd like to think that I have a foolproof system for loading the dishwasher. This seems to be a topic that everyone believes that their way is the right way. And I'm ready to get very, very defensive. So what is the right way to do this?
Well, this is brought to you by the people who told us we were peeing wrong and showering too much or not enough and washing our hair too much or not enough. And what else did they tell us we were doing wrong? There have been a lot of things that we've learned we were doing wrong. Sleeping in the wrong positions, wearing the wrong shoes. We're generally just wrong about most things. But this basically people are saying that you are not loading your dishwasher optimally so that the dishes actually hit the water hits the dishes
Mm.
equally. So we gotta put the knives point or blade down. They don't say what we should do with the swords, but we know
Knives
about the
blade down.
knives. Um, and spoons should alternate up and down because you don't want two spoons to
To spoon each
nest.
other. Yeah.
That's right. Forks should go tines up.
Okay.
But we should grab them by the handle when we unload the clean dishes, because if you grab them by the tines, then you're dirtying your disinfected utensils.
Yeah.
Uh, Now we also need to be really careful about our glassware. So they shouldn't go over the tines in the top rack, but against them. So they need to go in the row and not over those plastic tines.
What?
So like in a single row, not over them.
Oh, whoa, whoa.
Because
You keep using this word tines, which is the first time I've heard it in my life. But you're saying on the top rack, the little
yes,
pokey plastic
the
things
pokey
that give it
things.
structure and give it the lanes, you're saying I
Yeah.
cannot have a bowl draped over one of those?
Uh, Bowls shouldn't go there. This is for glasses, and the glasses should not be uh, intersecting two lanes. They need to be in one lane only. Otherwise, you can damage your glasses.
That's ridiculous, but go on. Where are my bowls going?
Well, you need to get a better dishwasher because apparently some newer dishwashers have tines that can fold down,
Okay.
and so then you can like have bigger rows. But otherwise, you got to put them on the lower rack.
But the lower rack has these tines, as you put it. So how am I getting
Yeah,
around this?
but they can go because you have the bowl facing out, and so it's not going over two tines. It's going in one row.
Okay.
Unless
Yeah.
you have a really big bowl, like a mixing bowl, and then you have to hand wash it. It's not going to work.
I mean, I have a lot of issues with this. I feel like we're kind of overthinking it a little bit, right? You throw them in there, it's very hot, it's very soapy, it's very watery. You bring them out when they're dry, and all of a sudden, you're good to go. I feel like this is a whole lot of effort here just to get a pretty standard task done, if you ask me. How do you feel about this? Do you feel attacked? Do you feel like this is overkill? Do you feel like someone's finally speaking your language?
My whole life, every time anyone in my family put anything in the dishwasher, my mom moved it. So
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
never ever load like it didn't matter what it was, you did it wrong according to my mom. But she could never articulate like how she actually wanted it, so no one ever knew. And so you were just like, all right, I'm just going to put it there and she's going to move it. So maybe she wrote this article.
It's very possible. I do think that every household has the one person who basically views themselves as the person who does it right, and takes it upon themselves to go fix everybody's issues. But yeah, I mean, people in the live chat, they can self-report whether or not they are the fixer or the one who gets fixed. But I know for me, frankly, the only thing I care about with this process is getting as many things in as possible. And so I'm sure
That's
that
fair.
everything I do goes against the rules by this tyrant, who's shouting down these orders from up on high, this Caroline Forte.
The executive director of Good Housekeeping Institute's home care and cleaning lab.
Well,
She also mentions that it really impacts people's relationships,
I'm not.
which You know what? I have another thing to say. People who don't rinse enough and then put it in the dishwasher, that actually bothers me. You
Well,
have to
yeah, that's
rinse
crazy.
appropriately.
That's crazy.
Like,
You got to have that thing looking pretty clean by the time it gets in there. That
accurate.
I'm very particular about that. But I will say this, you know, Lauren, people have different affiliations to different organizations. In fitness, you got, oh, I really like NASM. No, I like NSCA. I like the ACSM. I am not a good housekeeping institute person. I'm much more into the Institute for Excellence in Housekeeping. That's where I've done all my
Right.
certifications and where I'm more active in that group. So I'd like to bring in one of their experts and kind of see where there's some points of difference and kind of have them fight it out. Maybe get them on the show.
I'm surprised that you are as passionate about this topic as you are. It's very interesting.
I don't like being told what to do, Lauren. That is the entirety of my personality.
Okay, fair.
All right, Lauren, we got a very explosive topic here. One of great.
You've introduced every topic that way, but sure. Go
It's a
ahead.
very explosive day. I was going to say a topic of great controversy. So there's a show. I guess it's on YouTube. Is that where the show exists? Called Jubilee.
I
And
think it's only on YouTube.
yeah, so Jillian Michaels. If you listened to our show, then you heard our whole episode on The Biggest Loser. And we did a whole show on the documentary about that, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jillian Michaels is like one of the most famous people that kind of built her brand around being one of the trainers on that show. So she was on Jubilee, which is basically they have like a group of, I don't know, 20-ish people sit around in chairs and they kind of tag in and debate a person. So Jillian Michaels was arguing that the body positive movement has become, in her view, a body don't care movement. You'll have to elaborate on what that means for me, Lauren, but she claims that the food industry benefits from the existence of the body positive movement, that obesity should not be normalized, and that she prefers the term body neutrality. So, Lauren, did you watch this? And if so, what were your impressions?
So I didn't watch the whole thing because it was quite long, but I did watch some of it. And this is kind of, I mean, the whole setup is a little bit weird. It's Jillian Michaels in the middle, and then they play like musical chairs to get to debate her.
And then like rush in. You know, people
Yeah.
really want to get in there and kind
It's
of.
like everybody run, and the first person to sit in the chair gets to debate her for however long, and they
Yeah.
continue to do that throughout. But her point was that the body positivity movement is normalizing health at every size, which is saying that, like, ignoring the fact that obesity is a health issue, and that we should kind of stop using that term. She claims that the food industry benefits the most from positive body positivity, and that they've kind of co-opted that language in order to encourage people to eat a lot of highly palatable food because they're saying that, you know, your weight doesn't matter. But her critics kind of claim that your body image is a lot more complicated than that, that disordered eating is more complicated, that she kind of frames obesity as a choice, and her claims about health don't really, and frankly, they shouldn't because she's not a healthcare professional, don't really kind of separate, okay, like at what point is it actually, you know, you're unhealthy because of your weight versus you're somebody who is overweight but still active and healthy. So a lot of chatter about this online, but I think the last thing is the term kind of body neutrality, which I think is we'll get to that, but I have issues with that one.
Yeah. I've written about this topic before. And it's interesting because this is one of those debates that occurs, and a lot of these debates that have gone on, you know, for a long time are like, they're fairly intractable in the sense that like people are never going to meet in the middle. There's too much, I identity and opinion and all these other things, and they can't really converge on like, let's just establish what the facts of the case are and then kind of work our way back from there. This is one of those debates, though, where I think in many cases it actually can go well. And you can sit down with people and say, let's take a look at the evidence and kind of work our way back from there. And so whenever I write about this topic of, I don't really write about body positivity, but I do talk about like the concept of like health at every size. And I think there are multiple ways to interpret a phrase like that, health at every size. One is that regardless of your size, we should pursue health promoting behaviors. You should pursue health at every size. Another way of interpreting it is size has absolutely nothing to do with health and is in no way correlated with any metric of health or health outcomes. Those are two very, very different meanings that people kind of choose which prism they're looking through and then argue with the other one. It seems to be my experience. But, when we talk about weight and body positivity and health at every size and all these things, I think the most helpful thing you can do is kind of establish a foundation of what the evidence suggests to us. What that evidence suggests is elevated adiposity does tend to correlate pretty well with the risk of several chronic diseases, no fewer than like 16 of them. And that is worth knowing for anyone who wishes to make informed choices about their health and their health behaviors. I think with the rise of GLP-1s, the idea of framing obesity as a choice or something that is pinned down to laziness or any other kind of like moral judgment is extremely indefensible. I think my best understanding of obesity and excess adiposity is a medical condition characterized predominantly by dysregulation of appetite. And I think it's very telling that when we go in and pharmacologically kind of rewire that appetite regulation through GLP-1s and other co-agonists, we see the most dramatic effects on weight loss we've ever seen, right? It's not an energy expenditure thing. It's not it really does seem to be regulation of appetite, and everyone's appetite is calibrated a little bit differently. So I think it's important that we get away from the judgmental thing where we almost put some kind of moral judgment on individuals with elevated weight or larger bodies. I think it's useful to wrestle with the literature showing us that there is some degree of relationship between adiposity and the prevalence and severity of various chronic diseases. I don't think it does anyone favors to ignore that evidence. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize two other things. Number one, it's very difficult to argue that there's any benefit of feeling bad about your body. Right? Like the idea of like, hey, take this shame and embarrassment, that'll serve you well. That hasn't panned out very well in the research. This idea of stigmatizing large bodies or stigmatizing excess body weight, that seems to be adding additional damage, both in terms of mental and physical health on top of whatever physical health ramifications there are from elevated body weight. So the whole idea of like, let's shame people into being healthy doesn't work. Has never worked. I'm not going to say that.
And that was the biggest loser.
And that was the biggest loser. Yeah. I mean, you will find on occasion an individual who says, I got bullied mercilessly about my weight, and that's what caused me to lose 200 pounds, and I'm glad it happened. That is not the norm, and the research shows us that's an extremely atypical response to that type of thing. The other thing that I think is important to recognize is when we're talking to someone who has an elevated body weight, and I've been very open about it, right? Like I historically have been pretty lean. I went on a medication that is known to cause weight gain. I became clinically obese. There's no getting around that. My BMI was elevated. I didn't have enough muscularity to play the card where I say, well, I'm just muscular. No, like I developed obesity. And it did me no favors to fool myself into thinking that that was not going to impact my health. And my blood pressure went up. There were physiological, medically relevant ramifications of that change in body weight and that change in adiposity. But the important thing to recognize is it can be very, very difficult to modify body weight, especially in the absence of pharmacological intervention. And yet there are other health promoting behaviors that you can engage in with a very high rate of success. And so one of the things that's important to recognize is for someone who comes in with elevated body weight and clinical manifestations of that or clinical ramifications of that, whether it's high blood pressure, glycemic control that, is trending toward diabetes or elevated blood lipids, we can still tell that person, hey, whether or not you want to lose weight, because a lot of people have very sensitive relationships with that topic and a whole history of, potentially really, really negative experiences trying to reduce their body weight. Whether or not you wish to reduce your body weight, what we can do is say, well, since your blood pressure is high, let's modify your sodium intake and see if that moves the needle. Let's increase your vegetable intake and see if that moves the needle. Let's cut out a couple of these different types of highly processed foods and see if that moves the needle. Let's work on stress reduction or stress management. Let's work on getting more physical activity. And so what we might call weight neutral health interventions definitely can play a huge role in supporting the health of someone who does have an elevated body weight or elevated BMI. So I know, Lauren, I went on a rant there. It was a whole word salad. But I think that the way to really strike the kind of middle of this debate and be maximally helpful and maximally empathetic is, in my opinion, to have a conversation that is informed by the evidence, but also informed by what interventions have high success rates, what interventions are right for any given person at any given time, and treating the person with a level of empathy and respecting their dignity and not being judgmental and, frankly, a jerk.
Yeah, I think we've seen this on both sides, even when public figures or musicians, actors have been a sort of like a figure of that movement, whether that was by their choice or not, and then they decided to lose weight, and then they're vilified for it, and then they come out and say, "Well, I realized that no, I wanted to improve my health, or I wanted to have kids, or and so I decided to lose weight," and then people are mad that they can't be kind of a part of that, and I don't like that because there's one thing to say, okay, why are we shaming people? Why can't we feel good in our skin no matter what? Like, that's a good message. But to do anything that is health promoting, regardless of your size, should also be celebrated and supported. So I think the fact that this is a debate is not the appropriate way to frame the conversation and doesn't really help anybody. And it goes beyond just size. And that's why this kind of term, oh, we should just be using body neutrality. Like, good luck in today's society having people, especially women, but certainly men too, feeling totally neutral about the way they look. Like, we have not only weight, but aging or body type in general, or realizing that oh, I wish I had the skin of this influencer, or the ability to have the glutes of that influencer, or whatever the thing is. Like, I wish, I had abs or a smaller waist, and some of these things are totally genetic or structural or not natural. And that makes this whole conversation that much more complex by saying, well, in this society, in this landscape, the idea that you can be like, who cares what you look like, is ridiculous. Having a totally neutral, I don't care. I know that that's the case for you, but for most people, we're not getting there. And so I just think we need to be a bit more realistic about instead of saying, like, just deal with it, accept it, being understanding, okay, if I want to change something, why is it that I'm interested in changing that? Is it because I feel that there's an issue with my health, given what's going on, in my current body? Or is it that I'm surrounded by people or images or videos which may or may not be real, and they're making me feel like I should look like something else, and therefore I'm going to go to great lengths, and in some cases great expense, to try to change that, sometimes to the detriment of my health.
Yeah, I really like how you pointed out that one of the negative consequences of the internet, of which I can name a few, to be honest, we got really into debate culture. And it has led to a situation where people rarely stop to think, is this a topic for which debating is the right tool for the job? You know, so there are way, way, way too many topics where what we really ought to be doing is trying to find the middle ground and then occupying it together. And instead, we're framing it as tug of war. Let's see who wins this thing, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're grabbing onto that metaphorical rope and giving it a good pull, and you're pulling on the side of you should feel worse about the way you look and what your body is, I'm not sure. I don't understand why you want to win that. Like that's not really a good place to get to. And I think anyone who's going into this kind of conversation, not debate, but goes into a conversation about this topic would say, almost from the perspective of a good clinician, how can I convey the relevant information that would empower someone to take control of their health-related decisions in a way that isn't based on shame or guilt or bullying or any other kind of negative affect? Like, how can I simply give a person the information that they would need to chart their course as they see fit? And part of that information is pointing out the negative ramifications of weight stigma and weight bias, and the futility of treating shame as a health intervention, which it's not. But another part of that is having, very data-driven conversations about what happens when a person develops excess adiposity. And that's why I taught a course this semester about exercise in public health, and we did talk about obesity in public health. And it was a really fun class to teach, and I think one where there was a lot of potential for impact. And one of the most important things I wanted to do in that course was actually teach the pathophysiology of obesity. And so when we say pathophysiology of blank, what we're talking about is essentially what is the physiological underpinning by which something has deleterious impacts on health or function, right? And so what we talked about was, okay, you've heard that elevated BMI correlates with higher blood pressure, but you've also heard that BMI is total bullshit and fake and not useful and all this other stuff. So let's just look at what happens in the body when excess body fat accumulates and how that would interact with blood pressure regulation, how that would interact with your control systems for your blood sugar and glycemic control. How in the world would that actually directly increase your cholesterol level or impact your blood lipids? So what I wanted to do with that class was kind of demystify. And I think this is the best way to reach people who are really dug in and saying BMI is crap, and therefore we know nothing about the link between obesity and chronic disease, because obesity is diagnosed based on BMI in the vast majority of cases. But I do think part of this, if we want to get into communication and empowering people to make informed health decisions, which should be the goal of any practitioner, is making sure patients are informed about what they're doing. It's important to demystify that process and help people understand why excess adiposity is actually interfering with these different tissues and functions. So all that is to say, my hope is that for people who do struggle with their weight and do wish to lose some and wish to, change any variety of health metrics along the way, like you alluded to, I think it's really important that they deal with body image as part of that earlier rather than later. Sometimes people think, well, I'll lose this weight and everything will just fix itself and I'll have great body image. All my health metrics will get, straight back into the kind of ideal range. I think sometimes people don't really think about that whole process start to finish in terms of how their view of their body will change. And I think there's some preparatory work that goes into kind of facilitating that process. But yeah, I know it's kind of a winding rant and rave about this topic, but I like you indicated, I think it's a shame that this is framed as a debate rather than an educational kind of conversation where we can help people really better understand what's going on in their body and what they can do to take charge of the size of their body, the shape of their body, the way their body functions, what kind of things can be modified as they see fit based on their goals and where they're at.
For sure.
All right, Lauren, do we want to do one more before we wrap up here?
Sure.
You get your pick here.
Well, while we're talking weight, um, let's talk about this email from Maya. She let me know. I wasn't aware of this. There are hypothalamic amenorrhea coaches popping up on Instagram. And so the idea is that if you're somebody who doesn't have a regular period, they are going to coach you into getting it back, recovering from hypothalamic amenorrhea. And apparently there's somebody who wrote a book about this, and these coaches are kind of taking the principles that she laid out in her book, which are that if you're missing periods, then you need to eat a minimum of 2,500 calories per day, because if you lost your period, it's because you're under eating. It also discourages people from continuing to engage in physical activity. And I was really surprised to see that this was a thing, because I've certainly written about the concept of low energy availability. And one of the concerns about low energy availability, or in the past this was called the female athlete triad. Basically, this is more common in women than in men, and we see this in athletes who are doing high volumes of exercise or high intensity exercise, often female athletes, and also trying to maintain a low body weight, either for performance reasons or for aesthetic reasons that are required in the sport. So figure skaters, bodybuilding competitors, gymnasts, dancers, cyclists, it's common in those kinds of groups. And one of the signs that you're experiencing chronic low energy availability is that you stop having a regular period. So you go from somebody who used to have a regular period and now you don't. And there are a variety of reasons for this, but that's one of the kind of warning signs that something's going on that we can assess without doing a whole bunch of other testing, because it's not really that easy to kind of diagnose, because there's a lot of ramifications of being in a chronic state of low energy availability. But the recovery from that, meaning you've been doing a large amount of exercise relative to the energy you're taking in, you've been doing that on a chronic basis, and the system is saying there's a mismatch here, and there's a whole bunch of physiological downstream effects that impact all systems. It's not just about the menstrual cycle. But again, the menstrual cycle is a sign of this. However, when we look at the research, the recovery aspect from this is very, very complex. And the time course of that and the things that one should do to regain menstrual cycle and also recover from all of the other potential downstream effects that I mentioned, we don't know. We don't have that information. We certainly don't have enough information for people to be popping up saying that they are coaches.
Yeah, I mean, there was even a study where they found they were looking at athletes who were experiencing hypothalamic amenorrhea, and they were using recombinant or exogenous leptin injections to try to restore regular menstrual cycle. And they were like, the researchers were basically like, hey, the good news is it worked. The bad news is we had no idea how long it would take for any particular athlete. And the range was like from weeks, like a few weeks to the better part of a year, using the same exact intervention and a pretty similar initial kind of starting point physiologically. So like you said, with hypothalamic amenorrhea, a lot, if you wanted to like just create the perfect conditions for it, meaning the worst conditions physiologically, you would be dramatically under eating, you would be dramatically over exercising, and you'd be very, very stressed. Those things in combination are a recipe for disaster in terms of inducing this hypothalamic amenorrhea. Although, Lauren, let me walk that back a little bit. As it left my mouth, I said, ooh, that tastes bad. So I also want to acknowledge that there's some really interesting research happening right now where people are kind of revisiting and saying specifically in the context of like really elite sport, we need to really think through like what we consider to be adaptations versus pathologies. And so some people are writing some very insightful, very well-intentioned papers of saying, well, like, let's not necessarily conclude that somebody's body is fundamentally broken just because it adapts to what is considered kind of the training of an elite athlete, right? So like even when we look at males who don't have a menstrual cycle to kind of give us an indicator, we do see, drops in testosterone when they sustain really high levels of endurance activity for prolonged periods of time. And I just wanted to acknowledge that there's a lot of chatter going on in the background where female athlete triad, the reason that started to become such a big conversation in the research, if you go back to the roots, think about it, the triad. It was, two of the three are disordered eating and essentially bone issues. So we're having a lot of people who had clinically, very clinically relevant, problematic health ramifications stemming from eating disorders, and they were sustaining bone fractures, right? So it's very easy to look at that situation and say, this is not adaptive, this is pathological in terms of the actual medical consequences. But, there's interesting conversations happening in the literature of, well, you're an elite athlete, your health metrics look fine. Maybe your menstrual cycle is a little less regular, or maybe you're a male and your testosterone level has fallen. But other than that, your bone density is great, you're feeling great, you're healthy. So I just wanted to make a little bit of room in the conversation and acknowledge that those papers are happening. And so we have to consider the magnitude of degree here and the other kind of clinical elements that come along with it. Having acknowledged that, I also want to say, Lauren, I missed out on my career. This was it for me, and I didn't realize that. I mean, hypothalamic.com, Eric the hypothalamus coach, and
Yeah.
just jumping in there, all the research I did on bodybuilders, that was essentially the whole point of my research, right? When I was studying bodybuilders that were prepping for shows or recovering from shows, it was all just looking at, oh, hey, your hypothalamus decided that nothing's going to happen anymore, right? So testosterone goes down.
Metabolic.
Metabolic,
Metabolic.
hypothalamic. There's a lot we can do there. But yeah, I missed the boat because this is really where a lot of my early research existed, was looking at how the hypothalamus adapts to these low energy signals, these signals of high physical activity. So all that is to say, like, it is what they're talking about here. The drivers are very real. The clinical urgency depends on the actual clinical symptoms that manifest and the severity of those and the stage in life, right? So if you're working with a female athlete and she says, the only actual symptom that I'm seeing, and we've done all the blood work and we've done DEXA scans, my skeletal system is in great shape, all my health related markers are in great shape. The only thing I'm experiencing here is that as I'm an elite athlete, I'm having fewer or maybe no menstrual cycles, and I have no intention of pursuing reproduction at this point in my life. Then there's a really good conversation to be had about, well, what is the thing to be done about that? Something, or perhaps nothing, or wait and see and keep an eye on the clinical markers. But all that is to say, it's a really fascinating area. But the idea that just, some random person is going to say, oh yeah, I know a thing or two about exercise. I'm your hypothalamus coach. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard, Lauren. The idea that we could just go in and, like, to be fair, like, yeah, if someone has, hypothalamic amenorrhea and you're like, well, what is the surefire way to do everything possible with, the whole, like, everything in the kitchen sink approach? I guess it would be don't exercise at all, eat as much as you can possibly eat, and then do a whole bunch of stress management. Technically, those are the ingredients that would get you there, but then you're going to have a whole other issue on the other end when you talk about the ramifications of physical inactivity, the ramifications of being inactive and dramatically overeating for extended periods of time. We also start to see effects on the reproductive system when excess adiposity accumulates. So I would say let's leave this one to the experts and consult with a physician and take conservative approaches to treatment rather than these kind of knee-jerk reactions. That would be my take.
Yeah, I think that this advice is probably borrowed from really severe eating disorder treatment, which that needs to happen sometimes when somebody is in dire straits suffering from an eating disorder and needs to be hospitalized for an eating disorder and does need that sort of refeeding approach. However, if that's you, you should absolutely not be getting advice from somebody on Instagram. Um,
Yeah.
so I think the problem with this style of hormone-based coaching, especially when we're talking about loss of menstrual cycle, because it can happen for a variety of reasons, and you really need to contextualize that, you need the right expert. And if you are an athlete, perhaps your OBGYN isn't going to be the right expert. Perhaps you also need somebody who's really familiar with your sport and the demands of your sport, and the duration of which you need to be under eating for competition purposes, or doing really high volumes of training for competition purposes. So when we have this kind of conversation for the high level athlete, they are people who are going to be willing to make some small health sacrifices, some medium sized health sacrifices. I mean, we saw that with the injuries that people were getting in the Winter Olympics. We've seen that with competitive gymnastics year after year. These athletes are willing to sacrifice their health in the short term because they're in the Olympics. And so that's a different category of person than somebody who is a kind of fitness enthusiast or trying to lose weight, or perhaps has another underlying health condition going on and then doesn't have the menstrual cycle. And so those would have to be treated very, very differently, very, very case specific. And there is no coach or combination of specialties that would actually lend itself to being able to advise all of those people appropriately.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, we need to shake this idea that being an elite athlete makes you the healthiest person on the planet. You get to a point of competition where you start sacrificing health for competitive success in a lot of sports, not all necessarily, but in a lot. And, a great example of that, I published a paper many years ago where we were looking at retired professional football players. And listen, no, having dealt with, spaces where college and pro football players have been training, there's no illusion going on there that, so coach, you're telling me if I get up to 330 pounds to play nose tackle in the NFL, this is going to be good for me health-wise? There's no one's tricking themselves into believing that, right? There's an understanding. A lot of football players are carrying body weights that are not conducive to optimizing their health. A lot of football players are accepting a risk of repetitive brain impact that can definitely jeopardize their long-term health. And so, yeah, the idea that being good at sport and being the healthiest person on the planet are one and the same is an idea that we really need to shake, because it rarely pans out that way. Now, Lauren, I did see your screen flicker. Can you hear me? Can you talk? That's the real question. Well, you have to try. You have to open your mouth.
I can talk, but it switched my microphone.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that sounds absolutely dreadful, but you were just staring at me with your mouth shut. And I'm like, well, I can't tell if your microphone works if you choose not to talk. Okay, I got that one. So what I'll do, Lauren, is with my very crisp and clean microphone, I'll get us to the finish line here. Does that sound good? Folks, as always, we want to thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Front Page Fitness. We do this Mondays at 5:30 Eastern time, almost always live, sometimes pre-recorded if schedules dictate. But it is a pleasure having you. And Lauren, I am going to ask you to blink twice if I get this right. If you want to be one of the listeners who gets featured by giving us great feedback about a picture of your cat or geriatric pants, or you tried to buy a book that Lauren maybe wrote, maybe didn't. We're still trying to get to the bottom of that. But you can email us. I believe the email address is frontpagefitnesspodcast@gmail.com. And Lauren is nodding her head yes, so I have nailed it. And with that, I am going to wrap things up. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us. We will be back in 7 days with yet another episode.